that you'll hear. And I'm going to actually launch everyone else into the program now. And so we already have a nice crowd of 20 people with us, and I'm sure it's going to continue to come. So welcome to the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group's event today. I am proud and honored to introduce all of you to Guri Stark. And Guri is going to be the lecturer today. Also, Dana Schrager has stepped in, and I bravo Dana, because as you can see, I just went through 10 rounds of what felt like a boxing match. I had reconstructive cheek surgery because of cancer, basal cancer surgery that I have. And so a little bit under the weather. So I've asked Dana and I are friends and colleagues, because we may know Dana or seen Dana before, because Dana and I put together a program called Into the Light around intergenerational survivor trauma. So it was an exciting program, and it was in the first part of it was actually the premiere for our second season. I want to do a little tech check here, and then I'm going to turn the program over to Dana and to Guri. So one of the things that we are going to do is Guri has asked for questions to be held to the end of this presentation. So I want to point out that for you to take a look at the chat area. You're welcome to put your questions if you hear something about Guri and you want to ask him a question later on, please put it into chat. Dana, as part of her role as a moderator, will be watching those, and then we'll bring those questions out first to Guri. The other part I want to go over here is that we are on Zoom, and Zoom fails. It's a technology. So if you get cut off, just dial back in or link back in to I'll admit you. That's one of my jobs today. I have the easy job, and you'll be getting back on. We do want you to mute your mic so that we don't have any background noise or anything. So when we're ready, we will be opening up. Now I want to also go over the panel. On the bottom of your screen or on your mobile device or your iPad, there's a Zoom panel, and I'm going to show you how to use that. You'll see there under the More, that's where you have chat. So you can just click on chat and you can write your questions there. Under the Reactions button, it's very helpful for you if you click on that right now, and you will see that there's some icons there, one of them being raise hand. It's on the very bottom. I'm going to click that, and you're going to see that my hand is raised. And we're on multiple screens now. We have almost 30 people coming on board, and more every second coming in. So we will, both Dana and myself, look for these hand raises, and then we will call you out. What we'd like to do is have you unmute, and whether you had it in chat or whether you're ready to answer your question, you can answer it and direct your question directly. As soon as you start talking, Zoom will pick it up and put you on the front screen, and then Guri can see you. So I'm going to now give you a little bit of background on Dana, who's our moderator. And as I said, you may recognize Dana. We work together under this Managing Into the Light program. But Dana is a Schrager is a clinical psychologist who has helped clients in psychotherapy for over 25 years. She's from Los Angeles. Her specialties include generational trauma, midlife growth, and learning issues. Currently, Dana is on a sabbatical, writing a book about intergenerational trauma. Dana is also a second-generation survivor, and she's an avid home cook and recipe blogger. Some of you may already be part of her group. She runs and manages and founded 2 Jewish Facebook groups all about cooking. One of them is called Jewish Cooking for Global Jewish Cuisine and Jewish Holiday Cooking, and the other Jewish Holiday Cooking, everything you need for delicious and festive celebrations. So thank you, Dana, for stepping in at the last minute on my call, and I'll give the program over to you.
Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to help Jeffrey out, and I'm really excited to learn more about what Guri is going to teach us today. I'm going to read you a little bit about Guri. He's a retired high-tech executive. He's an artist and a musician trapped in the body of an engineer. He's been painting in watercolors for over 35 years. He was born in Israel and he moved to the United States 35 years ago. And as he mentioned, his parents were Holocaust survivors, so he's a second-gen survivor. I checked out Guri's website, and he's an artist himself, and he paints in really vibrant, colorful watercolors, and the paintings have a lot of movement to them. They just feel really alive and really hopeful to me, and really, really happy and really, really warm, really full of life. And so I'm really curious to hear more about what Guri has to say about the art of the Holocaust. I think the subtitle is Capturing Beauty, Brutality, and Hope. And so I've seen Holocaust art that's like a visual record of what happened. It's part of people's memory, but I'm curious to know about this art that represents hope as well. And Guri has been teaching art and art history for almost 20 years. He's a lecturer at UC San Diego. And when he talks about art, he combines the artist's personal biography and historical events, and talks about how those things have influenced the individual artist. So I'm really excited that Guri is here and to learn more about this genre of Holocaust art. And Guri, thank you for being here. And just to remind everybody, Guri's going to go through his lecture. So if you think of questions as he's talking, please enter them as we go in the chat. And when Guri's finished, I'll call on you so that you can ask him your questions. So thank you for being here today, Guri.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for sharing your Sunday with me this morning. Let me start by diving right in and sharing my screen so we can talk over this. And I hope you can now see it. Okay, I've been, like was said, I've been giving art lectures now for a long time on a variety of topics. I will talk about Picasso and Dali and Van Gogh and Chagall and Diego Rivera. I will even talk about the Beatles and the history of jazz and so on. But the one lecture of all of them that is closest to my heart is this one that you're going to hear today. And the main reason is that because I'm a second-generation son to Holocaust survivors that recently passed away a few years ago. And I can tell you that as a person that was born in Israel in the early days of my childhood and later on, I did not want to hear much about Holocaust. I felt that I grew up in a country that was new and up and coming, and the future was more important to me than the past. And I kind of did not like to talk about the past as much. And then later on in my life, something completely changed. And almost 180 degrees. And I started being very interested in the Holocaust, in all the stories. I started reading and watching movies. And even I wrote a book about it, which is the one that you see right here. It's called Third Wind. It's available on Amazon. And it's really a novel. It's a fictional novel, but it's based on stories that I've heard from my parents and others. And if you're interested, it's a relatively new book. You can find it on Amazon. So today we're going to talk about art of different types. We're going to talk about the masters of art, and specifically Chagall this time, and how they reacted to the Holocaust in their own art. Then we'll talk about art by victims, people in concentration camps that did not survive, but still documented what they saw around them. And we'll also talk about art by survivors, either art that they created during the Holocaust and survived, or art that they created later on from memory in a way to cope with the memory. We'll also talk about art by children. And of course, we'll talk about the story of the Theresienstadt, which was very unique and special from that perspective. But also we'll talk about the importance of art in general in our life, but art specifically in the context of Holocaust. Art as a visual and long living record. Art as evidence. Some of the art was used actually in the Nuremberg trials. Art as documentation of the horrors and the brutality, art as resistance, because it was actually dangerous to paint. And how would you get materials when you are in concentration camp? Art as a way to cope, to escape. Art as a hope, or thinking about the better times that were in the past or that will come in the future, hopefully. Art as a humor relief sometimes. And most importantly for me, art as a living memory of what happened. So all of that we'll try and cover in the next, I would say, around 1 hour. We'll see if we can do that. And I'll do it through stories. So the first one I want to talk about is art by the masters of art. And specifically, I chose only one, which is Marc Chagall. Marc Chagall is one of my most favorite art lecturers. He is, in my opinion, the most important Jewish artist of the 20th century. I call his art a poetry. He's the master of poetic art. He's the master of dreams and storytelling. And all his life, he painted his memories from the village where he grew up, Vitebsk. And it's all, including all the Jewish traditions that we saw around him, all the way from the fiddler, and he, I think, invented Fiddler on the Roof, all the way to all the traditions that existed in the village that he grew up in. Even though most of his life he lived in Paris, he still painted memories of those times. And because I said he was, he invented the Fiddler on the Roof, you can see here 2 examples of his art that relate to that. And in his art, you will see, because it's really dreams, you will see people flying in the air, you'll see houses upside down, you'll see all kinds of dreamy type of paintings, which if you have to classify it, it would be called expressive art. As far as the Holocaust itself, here's one example I want to show that he painted that is called Solitude. And if you look at the date down in the bottom, you'll see that it was painted in 1933. That was right after the Nazis came to power. So what this art is actually depicting, it's depicting the sense of tragedy. Something bad is going to happen. And you look at the rabbi and his face, and you look at the colors that are very grayish. It's like a storm is coming, and he here is expressing his worries about what is to come soon. And I'll give another example of his art, which is called the White Crucifixion. This art has to be explained, but in general, together with Picasso's Guernica, it's considered one of the strongest condemnation of war and hatred in the 20th century. What you see in the center of the piece, you see a person on a cross, but that person has a Jewish prayer shawl covering him, and that person has the face of Marc Chagall himself. The cross in this case is representing the suffering of all Jews. So that's the center. And then around it, you see a condemnation of the Nazis and also the Stalin regime. So the ones with the red flags on the left side are Stalin soldiers, and then the rest of them are Nazis that are really hurting Jews, chasing Jews, burning houses, burning synagogues, and you see Jews running away in all directions around it. And if you just look a little bit at the details, you'll see burning books, burning synagogues, burning houses, expressing what the Jews felt. And look at the top of the painting, and you'll see the people of the village up there flying in the air and looking down, and it cannot even watch what's going on. So that was Marc Chagall. I want to move on to talk about art by victims of the Holocaust. And the one that I want to mention first is Felix Nussbaum. And I will try and tell a little bit of the story of his life and then about his art. So Felix Nussbaum was born in Germany, but most of his life he lived in Belgium. And in 1940, after the Nazis attacked Belgium, he was arrested and was taken into a camp. And he painted in that camp what he saw around him. But later on, he was returned on a train to Germany, and he was able to escape on that train. And he met again with his wife, Felka, and they began life in hiding. And for 4 years, they were in hiding. And his friends supplied him while he was hiding with art supplies so he can continue to paint. So in those 4 years, he depicted again the feelings of him and all his friends about what it felt like to live in hiding like that. In 1944, in February, his parents were killed in Auschwitz. And in July, he and his wife were betrayed by an informer and were found in the attic where they were hiding. And they were arrested. And later on in August, they were sent to Auschwitz and murdered too. In this specific painting that you see here, it is called Threesome, he paints his family. You see him and his wife and his son. And you look at the expression on their faces, and you definitely the expression explains where they live. They live kind of in an area of a gray area between fear of death and a vague hope that maybe something better will happen in the future. If you look at the window and you see what outside of the window, you see the bare tree that is representing the horrors that are going on outside. And on the wall, you see a map of the world, and you see the map is completely in a shadow. It's his own shadow, but it's covered. Something not good is happening around the world. So look a little bit on the details and the expressions, and you see how the quality of the art here, which is amazing, of capturing expressions on the face of the people. Two more examples of Felix Nussbaum's art. These two are self-portraits. The one on the left is showing him in the camp, and I don't think I need to explain much what you see there. And the one on the right is again a self-portrait of himself with a Jewish identity card, and of course the badge on his coat, the wall that he is captured in, and then we see what's going on outside of the wall. Outside of the wall, there is a storm going on, but there is also bare trees, but maybe a little bit of a sign of hope with one tree that has flowers on it. The area between fear and hope. And look at his face. Look at the expression on his face. One more of his paintings, which is called Fear. And here you see him and his niece, which is 6 years old. And they are in the middle of a nighttime air raid. How do we know it's an air raid? So first of all, you see the light, the street light, which is covered in a blue glass to dim it. If you live through a war, and I did unfortunately in Israel, you know that you try to cover your lights so they are not seen from a distance from the air. But you see the moon a little bit, and the moon is highlighting an airplane, and I'll try to point it out to you if you don't see it. This is the airplane here. The airplane is in the middle of bombing the city, and you see the fear on their faces. There is a poster on the wall. So first of all, there is a wall behind them, and the wall is representing the fact that they are actually imprisoned in a ghetto. And the sign on the poster says "Tempest over Europe," which really means a storm in Europe. So he was able to capture here the feelings of fear that the two of them had while they were bombed. And this next painting, I'll spend much more time on. It's the last painting I will show from Felix Nussbaum. It's called Triumph of Death. It's the last painting that he painted before he was taken to die. And there is a lot going on in this painting. So I will zoom in a minute, but let's look at the whole painting for a minute. What you see here, you see a bunch of skeletons. Skeletons are playing music. The dead are playing music. There is one person there which is not a skeleton, and he's playing the organ. He's sitting there, and it's a self-portrait of himself, but he's not really playing. And down below, you see debris. And this debris represents the life. The life is broken down to pieces. All aspects of life are broken down to pieces, all the way from art to music to science to daily life items. They're all broken down. On the bottom right, you see a page from a calendar, and the calendar says on it, April 18, 1944. I don't know if you can see that. I'll point it here. And that's really the day in which this painting was painted. If I zoom in on some of it, you will see here the skeletons playing, and they actually are making more noise than actually playing. You see one of them is holding a bone in his hand, and he's playing a broken drum. You see that? And here you see the kites, and the kites have, some of them have threatening faces. From above, they are threatening you as if they're bombing you. And some of them have like blank faces, just don't care. And this is the debris that we talked about, or at least some of it. And if you just look at it, you will see a smashed head of justice, a broken piece of a classical building, like here, this one here, a film canister with the film stock spilled out. You see torn books. You see some scientific instruments, like here, broken. You see a broken telephone. You see his own discarded art palette and brushes. All pieces of life are around here, and they all lost their meaning. They don't exist anymore the way they used to. All the pleasures of the world are taken away from you by the Nazis. The music you see here down below is actually notes of a real song. It's a British song that was very popular at the time. It was called the Lambeth Walk, and the words for the song, the lyrics say, everything is free and easy, doing what you done well pleased. And of course, we know that life now was the exact opposite of that. And he was trying to capture this in his art. And here you see himself sitting by the organ, but not playing it, while the other skeletons, one of them is standing up triumphantly on a classical column with a kind of a grin on his face. And you see some of the kites actually looking like airplanes that are bombing. So here's the whole painting again, an amazing way to capture the horrors of the war, the destruction, the loss of life, the loss of dignity. Nothing really is left like it used to be. That's Felix Nussbaum. I want to switch on to David O'Leary. He's a survivor. He survived it. And his art is very, very difficult to watch, and you'll see it in a minute. What was special about him is that he was part of the Sonderkommando. And I'll explain what that is in a minute. And he was able to document what he saw while he worked as a Sonderkommando. So he was born in Poland, and he was taken to Auschwitz, to the concentration camp, in 1943. He was one of 1,000 Jews that was taken in that specific round of people. Out of the 1,000, 119 were selected to work, and he was one of them. So in a way, you can say maybe he was lucky. But if you think about what he was made to do as a Sonderkommando, he was part of the unit of prisoners that was forced to empty the gas chambers and take all the bodies into the crematorium and burn them. A horrible job. He was also, because he was an artist, he was forced by the Nazis to illustrate their literature, their books, their letters, their posters. And then in 1945, following the liberation, he learned that he was the only survivor, and he moved to Paris. His art was actually used in the Nuremberg trials, because he was able to document what he saw in the crematoriums. There were no drawings, no actual evidence done by the Nazis to document what was done inside those places, inside the crematoriums. And he painted that, he drew that, and I'll show you some of it in a minute. So because I warn you, it's very difficult to watch. His art later on, because it survived also, his art was shown around the world, in Paris, in New York, in Chicago. He retired from being an artist in 1962, and he died in 1985. And until now, his widow, his son, like many other artists, are continuing to show his art around the world. It's not moving. Here we go. So here is the first piece I want to show. It's called The Food of the Deaf for the Living. So once you are taken to the crematorium, you don't need your food anymore. Food was thrown away, thrown out, and he was collecting food and throwing it over the fence to other Holocaust people that can use the food. If you look at the details, first you can see his hand as the number, that's his number, and you can see the number on the right-hand side also. You can see the details of what he was collecting. But very importantly, look in the background. You see people are carrying bodies. You'll see that in a lot of his painting, here and here. You see the towers and you see the smoke coming out of the crematoriums. And look at his face. He's doing something forbidden. He can be put to death for what he's doing now. This painting is called Arrival of a Convoy. And of course, you see the train coming, and the train is bringing another convoy of people, while his friend is struggling to carry all the bodies from the gas chambers. So like I said earlier, his art are very difficult to look at. Many people prefer not to look at it and turn away, but he did a very important job to document what he saw around him. And on the left, you see it's called gassing. This is what's going on inside a gassing chamber. And on the bottom of that one, you'll see a little sign on that is said Zyklon B. The right one, he was punished, and he was sitting in a punishment chamber that he could not even stand up. It was so small. And then you see the crematoriums, you see the smoke coming out, and you see the Nazis stepping out on bodies. The experimental injection. This is Dr. Mengele administers an injection to a terrified prisoner, while the other prisoners are watching. By the number on the hand, you see that it's him himself. And again, look at the background here, and you see people are carrying bodies. You see the smoke coming out of the crematoriums. Unable to work. Those that were not able to work, that was a death sentence for them, almost an immediate one. And here he tried to capture the feelings of those that know that because of their inability to work, they will be sent to death pretty soon. And they know that. And just look at the background again. The smoke rising from the crematoriums. Here you see something a little bit strange. You look at the faces of the women and they look beautiful in a way. The Nazis, of course, considered female prisoners to be inferior, the lowest possible race. And they wanted them to look much worse than the German women, the Aryan women. But he did the opposite here. He did kind of a reversal. He made them look beautiful. You need to know that before the war, one of his jobs was to work for the movie industry. So he did posters from the movie industries and he painted beautiful women. So he knew how to paint them. And here he wants to show that these women that you see here had a better life before the war, a normal life before the war. So he's showing their faces as normal, much more beautiful than they really were. But now if you look at the painting, the drawings themselves, and you see the horror and you see what's going on, he was painting what he saw around him. Leaving for work, you see the group of prisoners, inmates, walking to work in the morning or looking down while they're walking by their friends being victims, being hanged, being killed. And the one on the right, the three muscle manners, the muscle man is a way they call the ones that are physically unable or to work or had exhaustion, and they are candidates for selection. So that's how they look like to him. David O'Leary, 1946, their last steps. One of his jobs was to bury the remains of children, and he documented that also. To me, this is one of the hardest ones to watch. And if you look at his hand again, you'll see his number on his hand in every painting. So he is documenting himself doing the work that he was assigned to do. One of the most horrible drawings is the one on the top. It's called the oven room. This is a real documentation of how the mechanism worked in a way. On the back of the drawing, you see bodies coming out of the basement, which is where the gassing chamber was. And then you see a very wet surface to the right, which made it easy to push those bodies to the oven. So they would come up in an elevator from the bottom. They would be pushed on the wet surface, and then the inmates will have to take them and put them into the crematoriums, which you see here. That's one of the only documentations that we had for how it worked, what was the mechanism. And the one in the bottom is admission to Mauthausen. In January of 1945, when prisoners were admitted to Mauthausen, and remember this is January, so it's freezing cold outside, they were forced to stand in the snow for 3 hours after they had to go through a freezing shower before they were allowed into the concentration camp. I don't think I need to say much here. Again, Massacre of the Innocents, more in color. You see the cruelness, you see the suffering, you see the chimneys. This is called the revolt of the Sonderkommando. I don't know if you knew that, but in Auschwitz was actually a revolt in the Sonderkommando. It happened in October of 1944, almost closer to the end of the war. And before that, kind of August timeframe, less and less people started coming or being transported to the concentration camp. So the Sonderkommando knew that soon it will be their turn to go to death. And in fact, at that time, later on, the Nazis started killing the Sonderkommando. Initially, 200 people, and then they wanted to kill 300 people. And one time when they did the roll call to identify those of the Sonderkommando that will be sent to death, they had a revolt. Initially, started throwing axes and stones and hammers on the Nazis in one of the crematoriums. And then the rumor spread around, and they started doing the same in other crematoriums. And some of them were actually able to capture some of the Nazis and throw them into the crematoriums, a few of them. Some of them were able to escape into a village. But unfortunately, the Nazis knew that it was coming. Somebody betrayed them, and they told the Nazis, so they were prepared for this revolt, and they captured everybody. And about 450 Sonderkommanders died during this revolt. before the revolt, they were actually able to get some explosives. They got it from the partisans through connections that they had. And after the revolt, the Nazis did an investigation and realized that it was 4 Jewish female employees that was employed in the factory that supplied explosives, that they were able to smuggle the explosives to them. And of course, these 4 ladies were hung in front of everybody in the middle of the camp. So there was a revolt. I did not know about it until I investigated the background to this painting. So that was David O'Leary. He survived. He survived a horrible job. I want to talk about another survivor, very famous. His name is Samuel Bach. Samuel Bach was born in 1933 and he's still alive. So he is now 88 years old. He survived the war, and everything that I'll show you, he painted after the war as a way to remember and to cope with what he saw there, and also to send a message. After the war, he immigrated to Israel. He lived there from 1948 until 1993, and then he moved to the United States. Before that, in 1941, when Vilna was occupied by the Nazis, he and his family was forced to move into the ghetto. He was 8 years old at that time. When he was 9, he held his first exhibition inside the ghetto. So he was an artist from a very young age. He and his mother sought refuge in a convent. They remained there for quite some time, and I'll tell you the story on the next slide. That's how they survived. And by the end of the war, they realized that the 2 of them were the only ones from the family that survived. This first painting that I show you is called a self-portrait. But in a way, you see here 3 figures. 2 of them, the one in the center and a little bit on the left made out of wood, is taken from a very famous photo. It's a photo of a Polish boy raising his hand, being removed by the Germans and got at gunpoint. Very famous photo, and from that he painted a lot. But the one next to that, the one in the center, is he himself. It's a self-portrait, and he's sitting in a sack, and that relates to his personal story. He and his family, his father and his mother and himself, were sent to a work camp initially. And his father helped his mother escape to a convent with the help of friends. And once she was there safe, he was able to put him in a sack and threw him out of a window, actually. And the family and friends picked him up, and together with his mother, they hid in a convent for the entire war. So this is representing him and his experience, but is also representing the little boy that is almost like a crucifixion. He is holding his hand almost like crucified. And in fact, Samuel Bach called it the Jewish crucifixion. In the background, you can also see the smoke from the crematoriums. This painting is called Letters. And of course, it's the tablets of the law, but they are crumbling. They're crumbling, they are completely broken down because the Holocaust violated the most important tenet, thou should not murder. So the whole universe of the 10 Commandments is in destruction. And you see that the letters are getting out of their places, they are floating in the air. There is an Aleph at the top that is kind of glowing, crowding it, but nothing is coherent. It's floating above a desert terrain, an empty terrain with really no nature, no vegetation in it. And he's trying to show here that, you know, the death camp consumed the bodies of the victims, but they consumed much more than that. They consumed a full structure of belief that has to be redesigned, recreated after the war. This painting is called The Ghetto. First of all, if you look at the frame around, you'll see that it's going into the horizon. There is no horizon here. It's kind of not vanishing into the horizon. And then in the center, you see sheets of slate that were removed, like from a tomb. And inside, it's leading your eye to look into like a grave. The grave is really a tunnel. Inside the tunnel, you see the crumbling buildings of the ghetto. And your eye is led to this. The whole energy of the painting is led into that ghetto, into the dark part of the ghetto, which is far in the distance. Even the yellow star on top is pointing into that area to help you figure out that you should look at what's going on there in the center. The ghetto is crumbling. In memoriam, if you look at this carefully, you'll see many, many of the symbols. You see the tablets burning. You see the boy with the raised hands. You see a book on the right side. You see the smoke coming out. Samuel Bach painted this boy so many times. I chose just a few to show you, mainly to look at the hands and to look at the face. And the last one, which is kind of combining the two elements. There is the grave, which looks like a Star of David, and there's this boy. So the victims of the traumatic events, mostly children, use art to help them cope. Art in general helps people cope even beyond the Holocaust. It's a way to allow to express yourself in a safe way, to express helplessness, which is hard to express in a very safe way, to express frustration, to express aggression, to create the process of healing, to start the process of healing, to unite people. That's what art is all about. And for people in the Holocaust, when everything else was taken away from them, for some of them, art became a way to escape, an emotional escape or intellectual escape. And when some of them were locked in the attic or in a concentration camp or in a ghetto, that was a way from them to think about the past, think about the future, document what they see around them. What's interesting about art is that it's permanent and it stays and the world can see it even a long time after the artist perished and went away. So I want to now move to talk a little bit about children's art and how they documented hope in the middle of tragedy. I want to tell you the story of Nelly Toll. Nelly Toll was born in Lviv in 1935. And after the Germans occupied Lviv, she was 6 years old. She was forced into hiding with her mother. Her 5-year-old brother was murdered at that time. And she and her mother were hiding in a very small bedroom apartment owned by a Christian couple. Inside this a very small room in a small apartment. And they were there for 18 months. And that's when she began painting. And she used watercolors to imagine happy days, happy children, carefree school days. Everything was nice colors, expressing hope, expressing comfort in the midst of this tragedy. She did not want to document the tragedy. She wanted to document her hope. She created a world of her own inside that small room where she was locked. In 1944, after Lviv was liberated, she and her mother realized that they were the only two survivors. They remained in Europe for several years. She went to school, she studied art officially, and then they immigrated to the US, and she continued to paint. She became a university lecturer. And of course, you can see her recently together with the German leader that just left the leadership. So she said, I painted a better world. Two girls walking through a lush green area, lush green meadow with flowers. She said, I was very happy doing these pictures. I completely forgot where I was. A way to escape the reality was to paint this. Kindergarten children walking to school, something she painted from memory, of course, as a child. So as we talk about children and children art, I want to mention Theresienstadt, or Theresen, the way it's called for short. Theresienstadt was a concentration camp that was built by the Nazis outside of Prague. It was called the waiting room of hell because people there were waiting to be transported to Auschwitz or Treblinka. It contained 150,000 Jews, 15,000 of them were children. And the Jewish prisoners secretly organized art and literature and theater classes for children so they learn to express their emotions while they're in the camp. They risked their lives to steal art, to document what they saw around them, to paint in general. And before I go into their art, I want to talk about a very specific person, Friedel Decker Brandeis, which was an educator in Theresienstadt. She was brought into Theresienstadt in 1942. She was an art educator, and she dedicated her time to teach art to children as an evasive therapy for the children. She taught many children there, and in fact, she saved 4,500 drawings done by children that now we can look at, and they are in many different museums, including Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Some of those paintings that were done in Theresienstadt by children. Kurt Kolek, 9 years old. Emma Taubova, 13 years old. Otto Unger. Frederick Fritta. Performances in the ghetto. They had theater groups in the ghetto in Theresienstadt. Still life. Music in the ghetto. In the showers. The living quarters. Here you can see actual documentation of how they lived inside the ghetto. A child prisoner at the window looking at what's going on outside. Richard Nussbaum, 14 years old, witness to camps and mass killings while in France. So you can see how he saw as a child, how he saw the killings. Art was also used as evidence and as resistance. It was dangerous to paint, especially because the Nazis knew that any evidence that will get out to the world will show them in a very bad light. And it's amazing how much care, how much time and effort they put into preventing the world from knowing what was really going on. Why would you do that? Unless you knew at some level that what you're doing is plain wrong. So they put a lot of efforts to hide what they did. And of course, any painting like that was forbidden. So the artists were in very great danger when they did what they did. Yuda Bacon, age 16. He survived and later in his life became a very famous artist. This one is very special. It's called The Face of My Father. It is in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Leo Haas. Has a great ability to capture expressions. Dinner time at the camp. An unsuccessful escape. Not only you see the blood on the person that tried to escape, but you see the grins on the faces of the Nazis. Death camp Auschwitz. Lift 3 of the quarantine. And there is a caption there, and I'll read to you what the caption says. It says, the newcomers to the camp are placed in a so-called quarantine, actually locked up for 4 weeks in a stifling block, 10 persons to a bunk 2 meters long. As this one says, you didn't get enough soup, this evening you'll get more. This is somebody that asked for some more soup. These are very hard to watch, but I think we have an obligation to watch them and share them. A friendly favor. Sometimes art was used as humor. And here you see a Jewish artist painting an SS guard, unflattering caricature of the face of an SS guard that could have resulted in very dangerous repercussion. This one here was created by Pavel Fantel, a humoristic way of looking what happened to him. Top left is 1941, and then 1942, and then 1943, and then 1944. Ironically, several months after he drew this cartoon, he was sent to Auschwitz where he was killed. Not only you can see how his body and his face are changing, but even the flower here is dying together with him. I want to tell you another art by a child. It's titled Paint What You See. Helga Vaisova. Helga was born in 1929 in Prague. At the age of 12, they were sent to Terezin. At the age of 15, they were moved to Auschwitz. She claimed that she was 18, that she's capable of work, so she convinced Mengele that she is old enough and strong enough to work, thus to live. So she painted what she saw around her. She would then transfer to Auschwitz, from Auschwitz to Freiburg near Dresden, and she escaped death again because at that time she was forced to join a 16-day death march in which most people did not survive to Mauthausen, but she survived it. She was there until the camp was liberated by the US Army in 1945. After the war ended, she returned to Prague to study painting. She was awarded an honorary doctorate by Massachusetts College of Art in Boston and other honorary degrees. She wrote a book, Helga's Diary, a young girl's account of her life in concentration camp, that was published in 2013. Today, she's still alive. She's 92 years old, and she lives in the same apartment in Prague where she was born. At the age of 13, her father told her, paint what you see, which is why she titled the whole collection of paintings, Paint What You See. Here she's painting the arrival at Terezin. People are arriving. And they are allowed 50 kilograms of luggage each, so they are carrying a lot of stuff. They don't know where they're going yet. They're duped into thinking that they were going into a resort or a spa. A doctor looking for lice on a woman. Overall, she painted 100 drawings, and her uncle took her drawings and hid them inside a brick wall, and they were found later on, and that's how the drawings survived. Here, she documented how she saw children being separated into two groups, the group that will survive and the ones that will not. Only 100 children from the 15,000 in the camp survived. All the rest of them were taken away and murdered. Suicide by barbed wire. Many of the prisoners could not take it anymore. The barbed wires, of course, were alive with electricity, and that was a way for them to escape the pain. This was all painted by a 13-year-old girl. That's her last picture. Everything can be sensed in the eyes of the children. Helga Vaisova. I think that's the last one I will show you. Another child survivor. This time it's Ella Lieberman. Ella was liberated from the captivity in 1945, and her exhibition in Florida, in the Florida Holocaust Museum, is called On the Edge of the Abyss. There are 93 drawings. All these drawings were done after the war. It's all from her memory. It was her way to cope with the memories. And she said, after the war, nothing else interested me except the urge to draw and to document. So she recorded all of this, and she looked, it was a way for her to reflect, to read of herself from the memories. And she passed away in Haifa in 1998. Her husband and her 3 children continue to show her art. Gib dein Kinder in Yiddish or in German. Children torn out of the arms of their mothers. Again, this was all painted from memory after the war. Some of it is symbolic, like the one on the left. You see the Nazi boot stepping all over the map, all over the globe. And on the right is the transport. Some of those drawings do not have, you don't have to explain them. Here she's capturing the fear of being hidden and the Nazis that keep looking for them. And sometimes they're very, very close to finding them. documenting the way the concentration camps look like. The one on the right looks like it's going into the horizon again. There is really no end to these banks. And you can see the faces of the people on the banks. They're all looking down. They all know what's coming next. The executions. She said, I reconstructed each picture shortly after I was liberated. With trembling hands, I began to reconstruct the hell from which, by a miracle, my mother and I had emerged. I felt that every drawing that disclosed the horror I had endured in some way eased my mind. My faith in mankind and the world of today, gradually returned, despite the cruelties my people and I had so recently suffered. So this is it. In summary, we covered the Holocaust by the masters like Marc Chagall, Holocaust by survivors, David O'Leary, the Sonderkommando, Samuel Bach, the art in the concentration camps, Felix Nussbaum, Theresienstadt, Friedel Decker, the art by the children like Judah Bacon, Nelly Toll, Helga Vaisovia, and the last one, Ella Lieberman. We also talked about the importance of art as a visual, long-standing record, as evidence, as documentation of the horrors and the brutality, as resistance, emotional escape, art for hope in the midst of the tragedy, art of memory of better times, even humor relief, and more importantly, art as a living memory. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to mention one thing. If you go on my website, you'll see some art that may be related to that, and you'll see my book that is a second generation perspective on what happened, and you can find it on Amazon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guri. Terrific. And I'll let you go, Dana, and take over from.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Wow, Guri, that was really emotional and powerful. And thank you for sharing that with us. I agree with you. This art really needs to be shared with the world to keep the message of these artists going. It's so moving. You're getting a lot of similar comments in the chat about people really appreciating you putting together this presentation and sharing it with us. So Jeffrey, one person wants to share this information with more people. So Guri or Jeffrey, is there a way that people can share this presentation and this information with others?
I'll let Jeffrey answer that. I think you recorded the session, so I don't mind if you want to share it. It's okay with me.
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't share the recordings because I haven't. They're usually about 2 megs in size on a 2 gigabytes in size. So it's not an easy share. And so these are recording for internal use only. I guess, Guri, to answer your question, answer the question, the materials that you presented, are they available to be shared?
No, I usually don't share my original presentation. If there is a video that can be shared, I welcome that.
Okay.
You can put it on I don't know, Google Drive or something like that, and people can access it from there. You don't have to send it around, but that's all I can say.
Okay. Go ahead,
Also, Guri, if you do this presentation again at some point, do you have like a Facebook page or something like that that people could follow in case you announce you're doing the presentation?
I should do that. I give a lot of lectures. I give a lecture almost every other week, but I usually do it in private locations. It can be the Osher program at UCSD. It can be synagogues, culture clubs, senior citizen places, private homes, and so on. So Some of them welcome other people to join, some of them not. So it really depends.
Maybe what we can do, if you can, if you're presenting again on this topic, maybe you can, and it's open to the public, maybe you can drop a note to Jeffrey and he'll advertise it in the group.
This specific presentation should be shared as much as possible and should be spread around just for the sake of awareness. So yes, next time I give it, I will definitely share it with Jeff, and I know Jeff has a huge list of contacts in his activities, and I welcome sharing it.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's go to the questions. If you, we got a question from Joan Marshall. Joan, do you want to ask your question? Unmute yourself and ask your question directly to Guri.
Yeah, I can do that. I was looking through my notes. Oh, I was just wondering how so many pieces survived the Holocaust, so many art pieces. I think I was wondering about Nussbaum in particular.
So it survived in many different ways. Some, of course, a lot of art did not survive, as you can guess. The ones that survived, usually it's either by mistake or that was a very special effort was done to hide it during the Holocaust. And either hide it in luggage or hide it in brick walls, and was found later by mistake and so on. So I don't know to answer the specific question you asked about Felix Nussbaum. That's all I can say about it. And I'm glad some of it was found and survived. Dana, you are muted.
Thank you. It's quite a miracle that some of this art survived. You know, people did go through, I think, the effort to find a way to hide it, to save it. Okay, so if you have more questions, you can either raise your hand or type it into the chat. You know, this is such a compelling topic.
Can I interject something? Cheryl Ratner Price, are you with us?
She was here earlier.
I don't know if she's still here. If you are, can you unmute yourself? Okay, I guess not. The reason I'm asking Cheryl actually took a trip she's a co-founder of the Butterfly Project along with Jan Lando, I believe, is also here today. And she made a video, a movie, a full-length movie, and she took one of the survivors who was taught by Frida. And I would hope if Cheryl is still with us that she could share that story, but I don't believe she is. That's too bad. Go ahead, Dana.
Okay, so if you have questions, either raise your hand or start speaking or put it in the chat, and let's get into more discussion about this amazing presentation we just saw. I'm looking for raised hands. I know I'm still digesting everything I saw. That was quite powerful. Lana, why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Oh, I just made an observation that you could put the recording somewhere and share a link to that recording, so you don't have to share the whole recording.
I understand.
You could put it on YouTube maybe, or
Lana, I'm really well educated in this area, but I'm choosing not to share these videos.
Okay, Jerry, I think, had his hand raised. No, or you're gesturing? Okay, okay.
I see Steve Clary is hand up.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Stephen. Unmute, Stephen.
Thank you. I just hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. Well, good morning, Guri. What a compelling and moving presentation. as usual, your scholarship is just continues to amaze. I had a rather specific question. In the painting by Euler, the Revolt of the Sonderkommando, in the upper right-hand corner is a rainbow and a shining village. And amidst all of the horror and terror that he portrays in his art, that looks to be a bit of an anomaly. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about it at all.
Yeah, I look at it as we speak. By the way, thank you, Steve, for the question. And those of you that don't know him, Steve is the, I don't know how title to give you, you're the director of the Osher Institute program at UCSD. I look at the painting right now and I see what you're asking, and I can share it just so other people can see it also. Just give me a second here. Oops, that's not what I wanted to share. I'll go back quickly. What just happened? David O'Lear. Here we go. That's the one you referred to. And then on the top right-hand corner, something looks very optimistic, and there is a rainbow relative to the left side and the rest of the painting, which looks very bleak. And I guess I can only interpret it in a way that there was always, it's a human nature to always have a grain of hope in the middle of everything. And especially the revolt itself may be a kind of a way of hope to get out of this. So he is mixing here hope and despair in the same painting, which is very, very interesting, yes.
Well, thank you, Guri.
Good observation.
So I have a question for you, Guri. Are all these paintings on public display somewhere, like in a Holocaust museum, or how do we find the work of these artists?
So I collected them over a long period of time from many, many sources. Some of them are in Yad Vashem, and actually I mentioned it in the presentation. It was written Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Some of them are in other museums, either in Israel or around the world, Holocaust museums in New York, in Florida, in Chicago. And in Israel, there are more than one museum that is showing Holocaust art in addition to Yad Vashem. For instance, there is a museum called Lochamei HaGetaot, for those of you that speak Hebrew. Lochamei HaGetaot is a kibbutz formed by people that fought. Lochamei HaGetaot, the meaning is the fighters of the ghetto. So they have a museum of their own, and some of the art I showed is from that museum. But if you search Holocaust art on Google, you'll find a ton of resources about it. There is no lack. And it was actually my challenge to choose which ones to show, to tell a story here, not just randomly showing pictures.
Fascinating. Do we have more questions? You can go ahead.
Marcy, you have a question in chat about how to attain, how did they attain the art supplies? So maybe you can unmute yourself, Marcy, and present your question.
Yes, thank you. This was such an amazing presentation, so I'm very grateful for the information. I think we're all recovering from, some of the shock of them as well. But it does seem absolutely incredible, even miraculous, that anyone could obtain, Guri, any art supplies in these brutal and inhumane circumstances. So can you speak to that? Because it seems like many of these artists didn't just do one or two paintings and no more supplies. They kept on producing. So please address that, and thank you so much again.
Thank you for the question, because getting art supply was a challenge, and it was dangerous to actually get them. So it depends. Those that were in hiding, in an attic, in a convent, they got it through those people that were hiding them. that supply them so they can actually either document or use it to survive and as a means to survive. So that was less of a risk and less of a challenge. Those in concentration camps, in the ghetto or in concentration camps, that was a big challenge. And they either had to steal, like they stole food, you know, they would go out and steal, or they used outside friendly resources that would smuggle it for them. So getting the resources was one challenge, and then actually painting and documenting was the other challenge, because they painted things that are completely forbidden to do. So yeah, it was a challenge. It was usually by stealing from German offices even, you know, you go to the office, you steal a pen, you steal a pencil, and that's how they got it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have a question for you, actually two questions for you, Guri. So I would like to know, since you're so immersed in the art of the Holocaust, how is it affecting your painting? And have you kind of bifurcated your mind so that you could, because a lot of your painting is hopeful and fresh, but you spend an amazing amount of time researching Holocaust art.
Yeah, I'm conflicted about that. Actually, none of my painting right now I would classify as Holocaust art or, you know, documenting the Holocaust. Although, you know, it's a big issue for me in general, and I do a lot of efforts in my life, especially after I retired, to focus on Holocaust awareness any way I can. I did not paint Holocaust yet. It's probably too painful for me at this moment. But I have to tell you that I'm thinking about it. I may do it. I paint Jewish topics, but I have not painted Holocaust topics yet.
Okay.
I may do that though.
So my second question is a follow-up to the question that you were just asked about supplies. And earlier, to listen to the presentation, Ava Maremi was on from Minneapolis, and she wrote a book called Hidden Memories, a memoir of the Holocaust, where her mother was in the camp in Auschwitz, and she was on a detail and then were put into a munitions factory. She actually stole a pencil, and she actually found labels that were ammunition labels in the thrown away in the garbage. She took those labels, sewed them into her work clothes, and then as the people as the women were talking about in the evening, they also talked about their mother's cooking, their celebratory menus, and she documented on the back of these munition labels recipes. And these recipes was part of Ava's book, as well as Ava donated over 600 of these recipes to the US Holocaust Museum. So it is, I guess, the answer of how people got supplies was they were stolen, and people risked their own lives to steal them.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to add that. I wanted to share that with the group. Unfortunately, Ava, I would have loved Ava to tell her family story, but she's not with us at this moment.
So that was a great question, Jeffrey. I think Joan Marshall has another question. Joan, do you want to unmute? You have a good question.
Unmute. Okay. Okay. Not that new at Zoom, but I always forget how to unmute. Yeah, I'm just really curious about how the artwork, so much of it was found and preserved and things learned about people that didn't survive. I wondered if any of the officers or people in the camp appreciated the art on some level and took it home and was found after the war. I just wondered about that. If you're aware of that, Guri.
I'm not aware of Nazis actually preserving Holocaust art. I'm aware, of course, of them stealing and preserving a lot of the arts. That's a different story. actually have another lecture about that.
Yeah.
But I don't see what the logic would be, although I cannot classify anything that the Nazis did as logical. But I'm not aware of it. No, I don't think it was preserved by the Nazis themselves. It was preserved mostly because it was in hiding. They did it all in secret. It was all in hiding, and possibly was found after the war. Or some of it was consciously hidden and was found after the war.
So I'm
Well,
curious.
sometimes the motivation, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, sometimes the motivation, the Nazis were record keeping. They like to keep records and films.
Yes, they did. They
So-
documented everything they did, but I'm not aware. Maybe I'm not aware of the Nazis actually preserving Jewish Holocaust art.
So Guri, you mentioned sometimes the art was hidden in suitcases. How did those suitcases end up getting preserved and found?
Well, they were preserved like a lot of other things were preserved in the concentration camps. Shoes and clothing and stuff like that were preserved and found later on. And when you opened it, you found inside drawings.
Didn't they go through the suitcases like looking for valuables and then like throw out everything else, or not necessarily? It was too many people.
I don't know to tell you. I don't know to tell you. When you open a suitcase and you don't find jewelry, you see some pieces of paper, maybe you just ignore it. I don't know. These are hard for me to answer these questions.
So
You did bring
Yeah.
up Friedel, and
Yes.
Friedel is one that actually hid her several hundred pieces of art that the children did and buried it, and it was found only after the camp was liberated.
Yes, she actually hid 4,500 drawings and paintings and buried them. Yes, and they were found later. But that's part of what I mentioned as a conscious effort to hide. And then later on it was found.
Very good. Well, if there's any other questions, why don't you speak out now, or we'll bring the program to a close. Before we do, I want to recommend, I just sent a chat to everyone that next Sunday we have another program that we're really excited about. Is Cara De Silva will be presenting her masterful on the 25th anniversary of her book writing, Hidden Secrets, the Recipes of Terezin. And that is going to be, I think, another exceptional program. Guri, we're really thankful and honored to have you present. And you can hear the tremendous feedback, even though you can't experience it personally. I'll give you a little hand clap, and I'm sure everyone else will give you a little hand clap as well.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to join our group, the Jewish Culture Holocaust group, just send me an email. I'm going to right now put my email in chat again. If you would like to get on the notification list for these programs, I would be happy to have you do that. And you can email me here again.
Guri, I've collected all the comments that have been put in the chat. They weren't questions, but they're people's appreciation for the power of this presentation. So I can share that with you after.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm looking through them and I'm amazed. Thank you for all the feedback you gave me here. That's encouraging, and that makes me want to do it more and more. And hi, Phil, I see you there.
Okay, Phil, you want to unmute, say something to Guri? You have to unmute yourself. Sorry. See if I can help you.
That's okay. We can talk later.
No, I got it.
Oh, we want to
you
hear
got
it.
it.
We
Yeah.
want to hear the inside stories. Come on.
Although,
Phil is my cousin, and he's in Toronto, and I'm glad that you're able to join us.
yeah, I'm a little bit late to the party. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, obviously we changed our clocks back, so I want to make sure that I do that announcement. So if you're still on daylight savings time, maybe you missed an hour, but I'm going to ask you And thank you all for coming. You're all becoming our valuable friendships. I see on you online. I talk to you online, and it's so great to finally see your faces. And we have a robust programming going on in November and December. And so send me your email address, and I'll be happy to put you on the notification list. And you can bet that I will be touching you, as I have been, to get people to come to this program as we go. Thank you, Dana, for stepping in for me. Some of you who may want to know, I have this massive Band-Aid on my cheek, and I asked Dana to come in as moderator. I had reconstructive cheek surgery on Thursday and wasn't expecting to have that. And so I feel like I ran 10 rounds in a boxing match and I lost. So, and I want to thank you, Guri, for hanging out with us. And I know it was difficult rescheduling this, but I'm so glad we were able to accomplish that. And we've made a great friendship, and I hope it will continue.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a nice Sunday. Thank you.
Bye-bye.